School Board. Happy to see you all here, and welcome to not only those here joining us in the room, but also online if you are viewing our live stream. So we will go ahead and get started with our workshop agenda, which I am pulling up right now. And we have our Director of Business Services at the table. And I will turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reed for our capital projects plan, which is our first order of business.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen, and welcome board members and colleagues, guests, anyone listening in. We're really happy to be with you this evening. So it's that time of year when we start finalizing our district's long-term facilities maintenance plan, which needs board approval before it's sent to the Department of Education. So we wanted to take this workshop opportunity to begin setting the stage for the presentations, especially for our newer board members, so that you can familiarize yourselves, and really all of us refamiliarize ourselves with the elements of the capital project planning process. Our Business Services Department partners with Ehlers Public Finance Advisors to identify how all of the work during the 10-year period will get financed. So here to present with Director Chapanduka is Matthew Hammer and Shelby McQuay from Ehlers. And thank you very much for being here. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Chapanduka.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Perry. Good evening, Chair Andreessen. Good evening, respective board members. As alluded by the superintendent, we definitely wanted to bring our partners from Ehlers to come and share some information on how we, first of all, structure our debt services, how we get funding for new construction or deferred maintenance, or some of the facility alternative bonds we sell requires some complex structuring because that impacts our taxpayers through property taxes. And we've been partnering with Ehlers for a long time in this work. So I just wanted them to educate us on what that process looks like as we start to look at our long-term facility maintenance bonds, as well as future referendums, as well as the impact on referendum, our operating referendum, as we've been discussing previously around the board in terms of when our operating referendum will expire, and some of the provisions which have been included in legislation around some authorities the board has in terms of voter approval referendum. With that said, I don't want to take Matthew and Shelby's moment, so I'll pass it on to them, and then they can kind of take us through the process. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I'm Shelby McQuay, and Matthew Hammer's here too. The first slide actually shows the full Ehlers team for Hopkins. We have a group of about 9 municipal advisors for the school finance team. But we're a part of a larger firm that works with municipalities throughout Minnesota, Wisconsin, and a couple other states as well. But we have been working with Hopkins for quite a while, and we're going to incorporate some history into the presentation as well, so that you have a nice basis from which we can kind of go forward. And we have, a computer at our fingertips. So if you want to go back and look up anything, we're happy to do that. But let's make this an interactive conversation so that you get out of this what you are hoping for your future planning. So
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks, Shelby. Matt Hammer here. We're going to start with just some high-level information about the district, or Hopkins School District itself. And we typically like to start just with tax base makeup. Every school district across the state of Minnesota is going to look a little different in this regard. And your district specifically is going to benefit from a commercial tax base with some of the large Fortune 500 companies that are located within it that help support some of the school levies and taxes through property tax levies that are passed on as part of the greater levy. That far left-hand column represents the market values that are assessed by Hennepin County each year that turn into the overall market value. And then 2 columns to the right are the 2 tax bases on how property tax levies are spread. So on the far right is how most of your levies will be spread, including your school building bonds, any debt service levies, the district's capital project levy. You can see the percentages of where those, in a percentage basis of how those tax levies come in. So about 47% of your net tax capacity levies come through residential property owners, where about 41% of those levies come through your commercial tax base. The tax base in the middle is, there's 4 levies that can get spread on that tax base. The main one that you'll see is the operating referendum. That's spread on what we call the referendum market value tax base. And that has a little bit different makeup where you can see the residential homeowners pay a little bit more, and then the commercial and industrial taxpayers pay about 23.8%. The other main one there is what we call local optional revenue, is the other levy that's spread on that tax base. So as we look at where we're at from a market value perspective, obviously there's a lot of cities that make up the Hopkins School District. This is some information that we pull together that comes from Hennepin County that gives you an idea of where estimated our median market values are on a per city basis, with the average value or the median value overall being about $475,000, and that's up a little bit from the year before at $450,000. And if we roll forward another year, we have preliminary information for '24 that $474,200 is going to be about $480,000 based on that preliminary assessment data from Hennepin County, which will be the basis for taxes payable in '25. We're going to shift gears to what your existing, this is what we call the operating levies, or what produces additional general edge revenue for the district. The district has 2 authorities currently outstanding. The operating referendum authority, which for fiscal year '25 or taxes payable '24 was about $2,255. And then the capital project levy on the right, which is a tax rate levy that is based on that net tax capacity tax base that generates 8.7% roughly times the tax base of revenue that is provided to the school district that mainly funds technology. The state cap is actually about $2,200 for fiscal '25. So the district has an authority above that cap and is actually generating some revenue in what we call the alternative cap. So the main point to take away from that is the district doesn't have any additional authority to access through an operating referendum to generate additional dollars for operations. The district could explore increasing that capital project levy because that does not have a cap, but those funds are limited to funding technology and other similar like projects. With the legislative session that happened in '23, school boards are now authorized to approve levies on a one-time basis at the same term and at the same length and same amount as what was approved by voters previously. That window is going to open up for the school board here at Hopkins starting July 1 of '25. So the district could renew that authority. So if you look at where that authority expires, you have revenue currently through fiscal '28. That authority would be able to be continued on if the board wanted to do that for another 10 years at that same, with the same terms with the inflationary adjustments, starting with '29 for another 10 years.
Can we pause for a minute? I know it's a lot of information. I wanted to see if the board has any questions because I know at a previous budget meeting, some of these questions came up around like, can we go back to the voters and see if we can get additional dollars? I just want to make sure that the board has an understanding of where we are with our caps, as well as the authority they have to be able to do an early renewal.
Could I ask some supporting questions before we get to that? On this page, starting with this page, is that, for clarification, is that 2,000, 300, 2,400, is that per pupil?
Yes, that is a per pupil authority.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 3, could you, I personally do not understand the net tax capacity, this negative 23 million and a negative 13.8%, which is on the far right column of page 3.
So that's tax increment financing districts, and that's getting subtracted off on the bottom of the tax base, which gets pulled off the rolls when those tax increment financing districts are open. And when they come offline or are decertified, then that portion of the tax base that's been in that tax increment financing district would come back onto the net tax capacity as a whole for the school district. And we don't have any that are eminent. When we looked at that, I think 29 or 30 is when the next one would come off.
Yeah, so tax increment financing isn't really a school function.
Okay.
It's something just that happens to your underlying tax base.
Okay.
There's little places we as school districts can insert ourselves into the conversation, but really it's largely a process that's done through cities and counties where they're taking a portion of their tax base and looking for some improvements. And generally those in the end benefit school districts through that $23 million tax base that will eventually come on.
Okay, I just wanted to ensure that is not any detrimental impact for us specifically. Okay. Would you repeat your question then about understanding our
Sure.
capacities here?
Sure. Yeah, so I know in previous conversations, both at the board table and in some conversations with, different focus groups, the question has come like, how do we increase revenue? Can we go back for a referendum pass? And what has also happened in the last legislative session, the legislature gave authority to school boards for the first time, I think, in a long time, where school board don't have to go to the voters to get approval to renew the referendum. Our next referendum is upcoming in 2027. And based on that approval, the board has an authority starting in July of 2025 to renew the referendum. What that basically means is, let's say we had capacity as a district to be able to go back to the voters and ask for an increase in terms of operating referendum, then that would give us an opportunity to exercise that. But from what is presented here, we have reached the maximum. So right now, if we go in 2025 July and renew the referendum, which is basically what the legislature is saying, that, well, if you don't either have the capacity or if you are not renewing to increase the referendum, then the board can just have that authority and pass another extension of our referendum. I just want to make sure that the board does have a clear understanding of that in terms of what capacity we have if we would want to get additional money. And based on what is presented, we don't have that capacity at this point in time. Outside of if we make some adjustments to our capital projects levy, which fund our technological infrastructures.
So statute provides that opportunity around the operating referendum and the capital projects levy, or just the operating referendum?
Just the
Right.
operating
So the capital projects levy, we have to go out again. And what would be the timing on that?
You can do that up to 5 years before expiration.
Okay.
So anytime within 5 years of expiration, you could ask for renewal.
Okay.
So the way that chart reads is that year that it goes to zero, is fiscal year 29, or taxes payable 28, and an election year 27. So that is the year you have to make sure that you ask the voters if they'll put that 8.7 back on.
Okay.
Before, and you can do up to 5 years, like Matthew said before that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is, we'll shift a little bit to capital projects. This is operations of the district, right? What's happening to pay staff, pay for curriculum, those pieces. We're touching on that first, and we'll shift gears onto some of the other pieces as we move forward.
Which is always a little confusing because they call it a capital project levy. And so capital project levy is an annual revenue that you're using towards the technology operations. And then, like Matthew said, we'll shift into more capital projects like building projects.
Yeah, and for the most part, districts have been accessing this authority. There were some districts that had 15 days to decide, and all of them chose to move forward as a board with authorizing those authorities. There is some considerations just to think about as a board for planning, ongoing planning, because that's a pretty significant amount of revenue on an ongoing basis the district can then plan for. And then obviously the other costs for just asking voters to renew those authorities as well, with some of the driving forces behind districts having this ability to look at doing this on a one-time basis at least, because they were virtually approving anyway, right?
So for clearer understanding, the capital project levy, is that the piece that we often have discussions around in our truth in taxation hearings, and if we want to raise it or it's going down, that's where we have discussions around, because it's based at a percentage, or can you
Yeah,
kind of explain that?
I think it's
piece?
your LTFM plan that we'll touch on. So this is a tax rate levy that was approved by voters, and
Okay.
it oftentimes, as your tax base ebbs and flows, as it goes up or goes down, right, the amount of revenue that gets collected will flow with the tax base changes. So this was something that's probably oftentimes referred to in your truth and taxation hearing, just because it increases. It's been increasing a little bit over the last number of years.
As property values increase.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So these are all components tied to the levy we passed in December. So between operating referendum, capital projects levy, our long-term facility maintenance, as well as our debt service. But we'll kind of go into, like Matthew saying, we'll go into some of those components here through the presentation.
Chair Andreessen, can I ask a question? I'm still learning about school budgets and all the terminology. So just pretend I'm a fifth grader. Could you explain to me what a capital project levy is?
Yeah, so, no, definitely. So our capital project levy is a designated fund which has to be voted by our taxpayers to fund technological needs in the district, whether it's personnel, whether it's our technological infrastructure, and anything related to our technology operations. So it's just a line item, which is kind of more restricted to technology purchases. And the district is authority to do that, and we've been doing it. The last vote was in 2017, and then usually it operates for 10 years, but you still can go back to the voters within 5 years to renew it. And then since it was approved in 2017, again, based on the net tax capacity, based on increases in property values within the district boundaries, that fund has kind of been increasing in value, but mostly restricted to purchasing of technological needs for the district.
So it's a question on the ballot that people can check for the tax levies. Okay.
Yeah, they
And
did.
then, so I'm assuming if we want to see an increase beyond what taxpayers are agreeing to, then that we'll need to go to like the Capitol to probably like, advocate for more.
So there's a couple different buckets that we're pulling together for operations, and the biggest bucket for public schools is state aid. So your amount per pupil that you get from the state, and you get this big state aid bucket. And then you have two other buckets. I mean, there's a lot of other, but generally speaking, a couple of other buckets. The operating referendum that you, as a school board, put on the ballot for Hopkins School District voters to say, will you authorize $2,200 or $2,300 per pupil that we are going to not get from the capital, but we're going to get from our local taxpayers? And they said yes. And then there's another question that you, as a school board, put on the ballot for Hopkins School District to say, will you raise money, will you raise your taxes for technology that we will use in the district? And we can't get that money. We need to supplement the money that's coming from the state aid, the legislature. And the voters said, yes, we will raise our own taxes so that you can have this additional money from the state, or from the local taxpayers. So that all comes together as part of your budget for total operations. And so it would be, if you wanted to raise any more money for technology, then you would go, you as a school board would say, we're going to go to the voters of Hopkins and ask for an additional amount of money from the local community.
And so how much does that typically raise their taxes by? Is it maybe like by 2%, 3%? Like how much does it usually?
Yeah, so we have a page in here that kind of speaks to a little bit of that when we get to it.
So for context, I'm wondering, because I wasn't paying that much attention to school board and capital project levies in 2017. Was that what allowed Hopkins to fund the one-to-one device that had us prepared for the pandemic and all that?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So it funded the one-to-one.
Continue funding.
Yeah, it continues funding. Yeah, because we still get the those dollars. Yeah, so so the one-to-one structure we have, and some of those positions in the district which are tied to maintaining and servicing those technologies. Yes.
And getting new ones as needed and all that. Thank you.
I just have a quick question, and I don't want to derail this. Will the numbers on page 3 reflect the light rail completion going in Hopkins, touching Hopkins, Eden Prairie, St. Louis Park? I guess I was just trying to understand from I know you're pulling today's numbers, but I'm wondering, knowing that passengers will be able to start riding that light rail by 2027, which will infer before June, you probably want to. My assumption is that there'll be a discussion to say, I don't want to say inflate, but to be able to see if there's any type of demand that you could see, because that's going to obviously attribute to the commercial value in addition to the residential value. And my speculation is that that should somewhat marginally increase the value of the property for both commercial and residential.
We didn't really look up where the TIFs are, but my guess is that as they were planning out the light rail, they created TIF districts around the light rail so that they could build up those. And so I think where you'll likely see it is when those TIF districts expire, and all of those businesses around there are now on your tax base. But so the light rail itself doesn't add to the tax base because it's likely exempt property owned by this a municipality or the state. But I think what you'll start to see over time is that it'll continue to contribute as those stops create businesses around each of those. So I would say not a lot of that is incorporated in here. What you see in your tax base largely, if you look at like your top taxpayers, are all the Fortune 500 companies like the Allianz and the they're United Health, yeah, that are sort of the big ones, and then all the other ones that continue to contribute to Hopkins schools.
Sure. Thank you.
And largely, I would say those are even offsetting to some degree those mom and pop shops, so that allowing those to kind of offsetting the taxes maybe a little, because they'll contribute a higher percentage.
Thank you.
Chair Andreessen, I have a question. Yeah. Yes. So this question is about categorization, I guess, of technology. Would things like solar panels be considered a technology, or are those not considered part of tech ops?
No, we have not really considered solar panels as part of technology. There are kind of different funding sources we have put into consideration for solar panels. And you know, some of the solar panels are kind of based on a leasing agreement with the financial institutions who fund this, in partnership with some of the electrical service providers, for example, Excel Energy. So right now we do have solar panels at the high school as well as at our middle schools, which are kind of feeding into the grid for Excel Energy, and that's where we get some of the savings. And we've structured that in a couple of ways through some mechanisms which are kind of funded through leased services in partnership with those energy service providers. But we have not used technology dollars to fund any of the solar energy. And I know in the recent memory, there's also been grants which have been offered by different entities around solar energy, and some of these structures from a financial standpoint are very complex. That's why we always partner with other entities who have really played a part in this industry.
Okay, so not technology, but maybe the capital levy potentially? Okay, thank you.
Correct.
So that was just touching on the operations side, and we do incorporate as our full long-term capital plan, which we're going to get into, is that component that's the capital project levy that's changing as the tax base is growing. We're incorporating that into our long-term plan, which ultimately is impacting taxes and is ultimately impacting the overall plan as we look at trying to create stability in the tax rates for the district as we go forward. And really, as we approach the plan on an ongoing basis, there's been more changes over the last couple of years than we would have seen over the last decade, just because of the changes that were happening in tax base growth. But overall, the goal is unless the voters are really looking for or voting on an increase, we're trying to manage the overall taxes for the school district, create stability. And the only time the taxpayers are really hopefully seeing any volatility or changes is when they would have voted on that, outside of other factors that are going on an ongoing basis. And some of those are outside of the district's control. So, I mean, people make improvements to their home, right? That's obviously going to change their taxes. If commercial properties are coming in, like we were talking about, that's going to offset taxes. That's obviously things that go on an ongoing basis every year. But our goal really is to manage those taxes to keep tax rates consistent over time. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we kind of roll into these next slides. That we'll go back on a little bit of history of where we were back in 2017 with that the past election, just to give some context of what was asked the last time voters were asked a question in Hopkins, and then some context as we look at options as we move forward with the plan that we monitor on an annual basis. So if we can click a couple slides forward.
So that comprehensive modeling tool that is in the intermediary is exactly what Matthew was talking about. And why you see us every other year from Ellers and selling bonds is part of a tool that you have to do ongoing maintenance on your facilities. But like Matthew was saying, we like to keep that nice and stable when the board is making their changes. And then as you go to the voters, that's where you can ask for additional authority. So on that next page where we have the tax impact, exactly that one. So this was the November 2017 election, and you had 3 questions on the ballot at that time. You had a $30 million bond question. So what that allowed you to do is get $30 million up front when you sold bonds to investors. You got the $30 million to do, I think there was an elementary school in there and other improvements to your buildings, and you were asking your taxpayers to pay that back over time for the cost kind of presented here. Question 2, you had previously asked the voters for a capital project levy, and then you had asked them in question 2 to renew that capital project levy. And because that changes, there's a delay. You have to look to last year's increase, and then you're spreading that increase over the next year. That's why you see some nominal increase there. And then what you did in question 3 goes to what we were talking about with your cap. So the state says for per pupil revenue on operating, we're going to try and create some uniformity across the state, and so we're going to limit what districts can ask for. And you were about at that limit. But because the legislature makes changes to their formulas every year, what was happening was that the cap was increasing at a slightly faster rate than your cap. And so what was done in question 3 was to increase it so that you would stay up above that cap. And because you were already, in either situation, already above the cap, we just wanted to kind of minimize that difference. But it didn't cost anything because you were already levying what you were limited in terms of the cap. So that's what essentially would be happening with the board renewal of the operating referendum. You are already levying at the cap, and that's what that tax impact would look like, 0. We're going to not increase it compared to the prior year based on what you're already levying right now. So that was 2017, and the voters approved all 3 questions, and there you can see what that increase of a capital project levy increase over the prior year. On a $400,000 home was $17. On a $400,000 home, a $30 million bond issue increased from the prior year, what they were already paying in school taxes, $42. And so that total ask in all 3 of those ballot questions amounted to $59 for a $400,000 home. That's what the voters said yes to. Yes, we agree to increase our taxes from the prior year, and we are under the assumption that it will increase about this much money. And you can see businesses pay more than homes. So for a $500,000 home, you can see that amount was $75, and for a commercial business, $92. So that's just part of the underlying tax base that you as a school district are given by the state. You don't have any say in that, but that's how it plays out. And we kind of think of it generally as your commercial businesses offsetting some of the impact to homeowners. And the apartments, we always list out as many as are practicable, and then the apartments are listed there as well. So that was the 2017 election, and as part of the ballot questions, there was lots of discussion on what you wanted to include as part of the narrative in the ballot question for the $30 million bond. The renewal of the capital project levy stated a large amount, and then the tax rate. They were actually voting on the tax rate And then the revoke and replace had the per pupil amounts that was revoked and then replaced with a higher amount. So that's what the ballot questions, if you think back to 2017, looked like.
Excuse me, could I ask about some context? So I'm looking at the Secretary of State website. It looks like 75%-ish approval. Is that higher or lower than similar districts?
That's higher.
Higher,
Usually
okay.
it's like 60-40.
Okay.
Herman Norcross, I think, was at like 85%. Usually renewals are high, you know, and that's exactly why the legislation was enacted to give boards the authority, is because there was consistency in approvals and voting yes, and then there was high approval rate. So that's where the legislature came in and said, maybe we just give boards authority to do that. Was it 75% on the bond question as well?
Question 2 was 75.84, and that was revoke existing capital project levy.
So that was 3, revoke and replace.
Is that revoke and replace? Oh, it's 2 on the Secretary of State.
Oh,
Yeah, revoke was actually lowest. But that's kind of election trivia, sorry.
Usually you get lower as you go on the,
All right,
it's
as you go down the
fatigue.
questions.
Yeah.
yeah. Or maybe it sounds worse, like, oh, they're revoking. tech,
Revoking,
Yeah.
what's that? No, we have a really strong tradition of passing referenda in Hopkins. And a lot of folks going back decades have worked really hard to do voter education and help our community understand why this funding is essential. So hat tip to all of them.
Yes. What you'll see on the next page is a little pictorial of what it looks like. So this is how we present the capital plan. So thinking about not the operating dollars, but really how you're funding the capital needs of the district. And incorporated here is that annual revenue, that capital technology project levy. So how this is oriented was, and this is how we've continued to do it. Your existing debt is in that light blue. You had a small lease levy at the time, and as part of the $30 million, you made it smaller as well. And then your capital project levy is in red. That was the ask between 2017 and 2018, and you can see the actual tax rate went down there. But and then the facilities maintenance funding. So the green is what we're in here talking about every other year, and what Torero brings to you every year as part of your LTFM 10-year plan. So that's all incorporated in here to make sure that when you are going to your TNT hearings, that everything is staying level over time. So what you as a board bring to the community is, to the extent possible, nice and level over time, and making sure we're coordinating that. So then that the 2018 building bonds, that yellow bar there is actually the increase over the prior year from of what the tax increase would cost, and that correlates to the previous page where it's the amount on the individual homeowners. So there's lots of information that comes to you as a board, and lots of information that you can bring out to your community. But largely what it comes down to is, how do we mitigate and control the tax impact? Because what your homeowners are looking at is a number. They want to know what their impact to their budget is, and then it becomes what projects are incorporated in an overall capital plan that they can identify that value with. Any questions on that? Okay. So, do you want?
Yeah, and you're going to see these illustrations kind of come forward. And the next slide is just kind of where we're at from the standpoint of this long-term planning. We're funding about, and we've been for a while, right, is funding around that $10 to $15 million a year, depending on the ebbs and flows of what projects need to happen on an ongoing basis. So the current plan of where we're at is funding about $120 million between fiscal 26 and 35. And we're doing that in a way where we're managing the levies through that combination of annual pay-go levies to try to mitigate and minimize the cost and fund portion of those through what we call general fund levies or pay-go levies, and a portion through bonds to try to front those bond proceeds in to take care of those projects in a timely manner. That you'll see, and when we look at this graph, you see that little jump between 24 and 25. That's really the change that's happening in the capital project levy that's greater than we've seen in historical perspective, because if you remember, that was 8.5% of the district's tax rate. So with that comes on a year delay. So as that year delay comes into play, that means the district's going to receive a little bit more revenue as part of that, which we're accounting for. That was approved by voters as part of that plan. And you can really see it in those orange bars as well as how that's playing out. And then we're forecasting stability like we have with future capacity. And currently where we're at with this overall plan, this plan accounts for those every other year future issuances like we've always been looking at with the district on a smaller scale. None of them are too long in repayment period, and then the green space represents the district's annual levies that we're funding, where the district just really purely gets the cash, right? They get the levy cash, and those are supporting those projects through that combination. The main thing to just kind of illustrate here is that future capacity that we've been developing as the district's been considering some long-term planning, and that's been something that's been part of the plan all along, that we're making sure we keep some of that capacity for projects that won't necessarily fit into the bucket of deferred maintenance necessarily as you start to explore improvements to your educational spaces beyond just maintaining facilities.
Before we move forward, I wanted to see how much time are we left with here.
Yes, I was just going to say we need to keep an eye on the time, because we do have another agenda item following this. So just wondering, is this something that we could maybe wrap up in the next couple of minutes? And are you available if we as board members have additional questions, because there's excellent information in here.
For sure, yeah.
That I really appreciate
Yeah.
being part of, for our community, but also for us as board members.
Yeah, we can definitely facilitate another session with the board and others.
Will some of this information be overlapped with LTFM
So
content?
Correct. So next at the next board meeting, we'll bring Site Logic to present our capital plan, which is funded by some of these bond funds will be selling. So we can maybe see if we can maybe bring them back, maybe at that time or the next board meeting.
That would be great. Any final?
No, I don't think so. There's additional information. It's like you said, if you have questions, circle them back through Torero, and we'll make sure that we get you the information that you're looking for as we move forward. So,
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Then we will move on to community education and summer programming.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen, and I'd like to thank Director Champaduca and our guest from Ellers, and then welcome our next set of guests to the board table. Community Education Director Alex Fisher and Assistant Directors Jaleesa Smith-Breedlove and Paris Timmons. And I'm sure most of you in our community knows that summer is a very busy time for community ed. In addition to ongoing adult programming, there's an extra emphasis on youth programming, included extended school year. So I see Director Contreras from Special Education here to maybe talk about ESY, enrichment-based credit recovery for high schoolers. So we just want to give you a glimpse of what we're preparing for this summer, and there's a lot of hard work involved in in putting together all of these fabulous programs, including Freedom School and Camp Royal and all the stuff. So thank you to our leaders and presenters, and I'll let you take it over from here, Alex.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mary Reed. Good evening. Hope everyone's doing well. Excited to be here with my colleagues, Fonda Contreras and Julissa Smith-Breedlove and Paris Timmons. And as Dr. Mary Reed mentioned, this is the time that community ed really shines. When many of the teachers and many of the staff kind of go on and do other things in the summer, this is the moment that community ed steps up to the plate and figures out how to provide those enriching experiences that really fuel a love for learning and make summer the magical time it is for our families. So I'm going to quickly turn it over to, I don't remember who's next. Is it? Thank you. So what we'll talk about today is we'll go over our targeted services program, Credit Recovery and Freedom School, and that will be Paris who will present that. Director Contreras will talk a little bit about our special services summer programming, and then Julissa will talk about community ed. So with that, I'll hand it over to Paris.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, so our Royal Learning Academy program this summer will serve scholars currently in grades kindergarten through 4th grade. Our dates are June 2nd, or 24th through August 2nd here at Eisenhower. We have modified our program a bit from last year, so we will be from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., Monday through Friday. We are ensuring that we have lots of off-campus experiences like we did last year on Fridays, along with literacy, math, and SEL daily, and then enrichment courses in the afternoon for scholars to rotate through for the 6-week program. Within the Royal Learning Academy this summer, we have 2 additional cohorts within the program, one of them serving our scholars who are in juntos, as well as a cohort for our scholars who receive special education services. These are additions that we know will support our scholars in ways that we haven't done before, and we look forward to it. Our high school credit recovery program will serve approximately 400 scholars this summer for 18 days. Scholars have the opportunity to earn 4 credits apiece, as well as, or predominantly with our core content courses. And we also have an opportunity to take some off-campus experiences as well that we're looking forward to doing. Our Freedom School program this summer has expanded to serve scholars currently in grades 3 through 8. That also means that families got to choose if they wanted to participate in Royal Learning Academy or Freedom School. Very excited to say that we have over the anticipated enrollment for scholars in grades 3 and 4. So we're looking forward to serving our younger scholars this summer as well. The integrated reading curriculum is integral as it's a literacy program. We have several enrichment activities that we have had previously with partnerships within the community that we are going to continue as well as expand. One of the most exciting things this summer, aside from expanding, is we have our first summer of JSLIs. So servant leader interns are the instructors of the program. They are not licensed teachers. And this summer, we have JSLIs, which stand for Junior Servant Leader Intern. We have, in order to be a JSLI, you've had to have participated in Freedom School in Hopkins before. So I'm very thrilled to say that we have 4 JSLIs this summer that are coming back to work full-time and serve our younger scholars in Freedom School. So it's turning into a very much grow your own program, which is really cool. They are very eager. We also have lots of off-site experiences planned, as well as our National Day of Social Action, which we will get together with other Freedom Schools within the state and focus on social justice. We have weekly family engagement meetings, and our big national training in Knoxville is just a few weeks away. So looking forward to that as well.
Good evening. So we will be hosting extended school year, which is for students with disabilities who qualify for either recoupment, regression, or critical skills. So if they need to continue in one of those three areas, they have to qualify to have those services in the summer. And it's all services that they would get during the normal school year. So if there are goals and objectives that they need to work on individually, that's what that programming is for. It's 3 weeks in July. In addition, we will be offering compensatory education. There were some speech positions we did not have filled in the fall at some of our private sites, as well as last spring, there were some services for social work that we had some turnover of staff. So we will be offering compensatory services for scholars this summer. And then the last program that we'll be doing for special education, it's our second summer doing a collaborative with St. David's. And they created a program for extracurricular activities for youth who traditionally don't join like after school sports and things. So we are a host to that program for multiple districts. So they've planned it and asked if they could host it at Hopkins. So this is summer number 2. And then we'll be going into the third fall, also offering that program for our students who traditionally have not played in like after school sports and things. So it's an exciting, unique little opportunity, and they will be at West Middle School.
I'm just going to do a brief overview of all of the programs that Community Ed puts on in the school district. So over the summer, so we have our early childhood family education with like parent and me classes and those sorts of things over the summer at Harley. We have Hop Kids, which is our recreation, sports, and for preschool age students, sports and arts and STEM. We have Hopkins Summer Preschool, so there's full-day opportunities for additional preschool learning at various sites. There's a 4-week program plus a 6-week program. And then there's Camp Royal Kids and Company, which will serve our 1st through 4th graders. Blink, which will serve our 5th and 6th graders, entering 5th and 6th grade, so those entering 1st and 4th. Secondary enrichment, which will be our middle school and high school, which we're really excited that we've expanded those options this summer and created some new partnerships. And then adult enrichment and then adult options in education will also have classes going. So I'll highlight Camp Royal. So Camp Royal will offer over 10 weeks, 201 camps. And we'll be able to offer, well, as of April 15th, we have 2,073 camp experiences. So that's some students going from anywhere to 1 to 10 weeks of Camp Royal. And we're a Monday through Thursday program. So we'll start right on that Monday, right after school releases on June 10th and go through August 15th. And families are able to create full-day and half-day camp experiences where we have supervision over the lunch hour. So they'll be here from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. here at Eisenhower. And new this year, we also have created and partnered with some of our certified teachers for immersion camps or cultural immersion camps. So we'll have a Spanish immersion camp as well as a Chinese culture camp. And then we have a big focus on STEAM and sports. And then new this summer, we'll have a middle school musical theater camp with some of our certified staff from the high school.
I can do this part. Assistant Director Chauvin was unable to attend tonight, but sent along this information. So just briefly, we do have summer ECFE classes going on. We have 46 families participating in that. And those classes run between May 28th and July 18th. And then we have preschool options as well, 4-week, 6-week, and 9-week options for families. They're 4 weeks apiece, and they include special education families. There are one thing that I think is important for everyone to know is that Resource West provides scholarships for families that want to participate, and we're very grateful for that really wonderful partnership with Resource West. Currently in summer preschool, we have 82 students enrolled. And I'd like to extend an invitation to all board members here. Hopefully you have received an email already, but Assistant Director Chelsea Ritland, who does a phenomenal job with adult options in education, has sent out the invitation for graduation, which is June 20th at 7 p.m. At the theater here at Eisenhower Community Center. The Minnetonka Rotary always sponsors that. They give a scholarship, so we're very grateful for their generosity and their partnership there. There will be some online ESL and GED classes this summer as well. And that period of time is between June 10th and July 25th. We mainly stress pronunciation. There's some conversation and some computer skills, and there's a book club also.
Great. Thank you so much. That was incredibly fast for all the things that are happening in community ed this summer, which is, I think I say this every year, it's my favorite time in community ed. And yeah, it's just amazing. So any comments or questions from any of my board colleagues?
Really quick, is Freedom School, are all the slots already taken or already filled?
We have 3 spots left. We have 3 spots left.
3 spots left? Okay.
Wow,
That's great.
that's amazing.
What are
Loved
the,
hearing that some of our high school scholars are working with Freedom School. It's amazing. Wonder if there are similar things happening with Camp Royal, if any of our high school scholars are helping out there.
Yeah, every year we have 5 to 6 Camp Royal assistants that are high school scholars that'll be joining us. And then we have a lifeguard certification course that's in May. And so that'll be new for us to have lifeguards, and high schoolers are able to take that certification class for free. And so they'll be able to help us do some of our swim camps, where we're super excited about expanding.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a quick shout out to Jaleesa for kind of spearheading that program. We had no lifeguard training program until Jaleesa decided it would be an important initiative for our community, so we're very grateful for that.
Thanks. And then I also want to add, I didn't talk about Kids in Company because everyone loves Kids in Company, but Kids in Company also has high school students that work there. I mean, they make up the bulk of it. And then returning alumni and returning Kids in Company enrollees and come back every year. So they'll have high schoolers too. Thanks.
I was just wondering which of any of those programs are open to students from other districts? Any of them?
Freedom School is.
Freedom School?
Yep,
Camp
Camp Royal, Kids in Company as well.
Okay. Do we have a lot of kids enrolling for Camp Royal? I noticed there were over 2,000 students who've signed up.
Yeah.
What portion of them would you say are non-Hopkins students, just out of curiosity?
I typically look at the end of the summer. I haven't looked
Oh,
as
okay.
of right now.
Okay.
But there's typically about 25 to 30%.
Really?
Depending on what we offer.
Okay,
Yeah.
good to know.
Coming from neighboring districts
Okay.
nearby.
Thank you. Thank you for all of the work that goes into putting together these fantastic programs.
Thanks.
It's a heavy lift.
One more quick question. Are we still in partnership with the YMCA this summer as well?
We don't have a summer partnership with YMCA, but we do, we launched a school year partnership with them, and we are looking to have conversation over the summer about continuing that partnership for the school year.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah, too.
And that brings us to the end of our workshop and beginning of our board meeting in 1 minute, but we will take a quick break so that people can gather themselves and come in and get settled. See you back here at 7:07. Welcome to the Hopkins School Board meeting for April 23rd, 2024. It is 7:09 and we will get started. I call this meeting to order. Our first order of business at our Hopkins School Board meetings are open agenda, our public comment section. We have two opportunities to hear from our community. One is at the beginning of the school board meeting for items on the agenda. If a public comment is on an item that is not on the agenda, we hear that at the end of the meeting. I have received one public comment card for this evening's meeting, and it is for comments that are on the agenda, items that are on the agenda. So we will soon invite those members of our community to the board table to give their public comment. There are several ways to get in touch with the school board. One is to submit a voicemail so that that will be played back at one of our public comment sections in the board meetings. The other option is to show up here in person and fill out a comment card that is located at the back of the room before the meeting begins. You can also always send us an email and we will get your comments that way. So without further ado, I would like to invite our community members up to the board table and to let you know that we appreciate your input. And there are just a few guidelines that you need to follow when addressing the school board. You may speak for 3 minutes. The members of the school board will not respond directly to public comments that are made at the meeting. A district representative may follow up with you after the meeting. If you have written comments, we would love having a copy, which will improve both our understanding of your concern and our ability to investigate and respond to the issue you raise. Personal attacks by anyone addressing the school board will not be tolerated. Persistence in such remarks by an individual or otherwise disruptive behavior shall terminate that person's privilege to address the school board. And with that being said, I would like to welcome Jocelyn and Jude Hartland and Ariana Walani to the board table. Thank you so much for being here this evening and addressing the school board. 3 minutes will start. I will let you decide who goes first and in what order. And you do technically have 9 minutes total to address the school board. Thank you.
Welcome.
Hello, my name is Jocelyn and I'm a 6th grader at North Middle School. Before you make any final decisions about next year's budget, I'd like to speak in support of our Hopkins staff. I love our librarians very much and would be sad to see any of them go. They're very kind and help us to find the books we love. I enjoy their company anytime I am around them. I hope you will take the idea of keeping our librarians into great consideration, and not just librarians. Each Hopkins staff member holds an important place in our hearts. We love all of them. Please keep in mind that all of our teachers, lunch staff, janitors, librarians, hall monitors, counselors, principals, and any other staff member plays an important role in our school communities, and any decision to get rid of them should be taken very seriously. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ariana, and I'm a 6th grader from North Middle School. Some of my favorite memories in the library were of the teachers. One of them is when I was feeling down, I went to the library looking for a book, and my librarians helped me find one that I loved. And not just that, they also made me happier and ready to face the day. I love all of our teachers. They have helped me grow and learn so much, and they will always have a special place in my heart. They have always helped when I need them, and I am here tonight to support them. So please consider keeping as many positions as possible, especially the librarians. Thank you for listening.
Hello, I am Jude. I go to school at Meadowbrook Elementary and I'm in 4th grade, and I am here to talk about the Media Center. I like to take breaks in the Media Center because it's a great place to relax. I also like the freedom in the books as they cover many subjects. I also like the setup. It helps me easily find books I will like. I love the people in the library and they go above and beyond to help me find a book I will like. Please try to keep as many people in the Media Center as possible. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate you being here.
And that concludes our public comment section of the meeting, and we will move on to our reports. The first part of our report section is the Student Board Representatives Report, and I am looking forward to hearing what is going on in our district from the student perspective. So welcome. Not sure who, I don't think anyone's joining us online. But who's first?
That would be me.
Good.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. If you can't tell, I'm very excited to be back here. I know I haven't been here in a while, but I've finally gotten some free evenings, and hopefully I'm going to be here more regularly. Today I'm going to talk about some current events at Hopkins Virtual EDU that I didn't get to talk about while I was away. So these technically happened in the past, but let's not pay attention to that. The first thing on the agenda is the Peaceful Pathway Project. Now that spring is beginning, we're going to start construction on it, and the students are going to be like a very central part of that. We're going to use math and like art and all sorts of things to help design the actual space, which we'll then be using for learning. Second, our family field trip to Feed My Starving Children was a huge hit, and I know that a whole bunch of people went, and that we ended up packing a lot of food, and that was like, it was very fun. I didn't get to go, but I have heard it was fun. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that currently our students are working on their project-based learning unit, which is a unit where we're sort of allowed to choose what we want to learn for the next month. And the options are Create Your Own Project, which is a student-led, teacher-monitored independent study program, food science, neuropsychology, and data and statistics. I know a lot of our students are really proud of what they've done, and I've been seeing like a lot of really amazing innovation just walking around the school area. So I just figured it was worth mentioning because it's just really amazing to me what kids can do when given the opportunity. The last thing I wanted to mention was that a lot of the students at Hopkins Virtual EDU have expressed concern about the elimination of library media specialists next year. And I can't speak for everyone on this account, and I can't make any financial decisions, but I'd just like to say that, like, as a student, especially as a high schooler, I think that libraries are really a safe space for a lot of us, and it's just a really amazing spot where you can have a little bit of peace and quiet and, you know, hang out with your friends and find books that you enjoy. So I'd really like to ask that you consider that in your final decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Manuel Wahyu, and I am a freshman student board representative. This morning at the high school, 10th graders took their reading MCAs and 11th graders took their math MCAs. Since 9th and 12th graders do not take the MCAs, they had the option to come into school at the usual time or come to school 2 hours later at 10:40, as that is when classes started for the day. 7 scholars were selected to be in the all-state choir this year. This is the equivalent of making it to state as an athlete. They will attend a camp at St. John's University this summer and sing in front of scholars from around the state. They will meet again to sing at the Orchestra Hall in February of next year. This is the first time we have had 7 scholars receive this honor. This week, scholars Clea Moore, a senior, and Harley Rosati, a sophomore, were highlighted as the illustrator and author of a poetry book titled Elusive Apologies, which is about experiences that many high schoolers go through. Harley, the author, will make sure copies of the book are donated to our Hopkins High School Media Center. The final show dates for the Royal Productions Robin Hood play are this Friday and Saturday at 7:30 p.m. This original adaptation includes all the familiar characters from Robin Hood, as well as new characters that help bring this adventure play to life. The price for tickets is $12 for general admission and $10 for students and seniors, so make sure you guys go check it out. As the spring sports begin diving deeper into their seasons, there are many exciting events coming up. The boys lacrosse team's Flapjack fundraiser at the Knollwood Applebee's is on Saturday from 8 to 10 a.m. The varsity baseball team will be playing Rogers at Target Field on Thursday, May 16th, and the Hopkins High School girls flag football team enrollment has opened, and practices and games will be on Tuesdays and Thursdays in May. This morning, the varsity boys golf team had an invitational with multiple schools. The girls golf team also had a meet with multiple schools. Happening right now is the boys and girls track and field teams to have their true team invitational meet. The JV and varsity boys tennis teams who have matches against St. Michael Albertville. All of the girls lacrosse teams have games against Buffalo, and all of the girls softball teams who have games against Minnetonka. Tomorrow is National Denim Day. This day was created to bring awareness to sexual assault and to stand in solidarity with those impacted. Denim Day was started when the Italian Supreme Court ruled that a man accused of sexual assault could not be convicted because the woman he sexually assaulted was wearing tight jeans and she had to have helped him take them off. Many students at the high school are planning on participating. Thank you.
And staff too, I think. Isn't there a picture tomorrow of staff wearing jeans?
Thank you for that, for both of those updates. Very comprehensive. Are there any comments or questions from my board colleagues?
Chair Andreessen, I did have a question about the peaceful pathways. Are those inside the building, outside the building? I'm so curious about what those are.
So those are actually outside the building, just a little bit down from where the school is centered, and it's a public space, so once it's finished, you can actually come check it out if you like.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yes, I think we'd all like to come check it out.
That example of the project involving food science, neuroscience, neuropsychology, something.
Sorry.
What were the 3 topics?
So there was neuropsychology,
Neuropsychology.
food science, create your own project, and data and statistics.
Right. Each very complex
Yeah.
subject matter. So, and these topics were self-identified by students?
Yeah, we usually have students like pick out topics that they would be interested in. Like they get to have a little bit of input in the beginning of the year and in the middle of the year.
That's great. So will you be showcasing your projects at some point and we could come visit?
I know for the last PBL unit, we did have a showcasing. I don't know about this unit, but I will ask.
Yeah, find out, let us know.
That'd be great.
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
Manuel, I was curious if you had a moment to walk us through what you do to prep for these meetings, because both of you, of course, offered lots of information. I just wondered what if you will tell the community what you do. How do you get all your information? Who do you talk to?
like to prepare for these?
Yeah.
I don't know. We just like Principal Ballard, she sends out a newsletter every week, so I'll go look at that and see like events or just events I hear about or things coming up at the high school, and I'll write it down and like,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah, thank you both very much. We appreciate your info so much.
I do as well, and I think our community really appreciates hearing what's going on, often both at virtual EDU and at the high school, because until you have kids in the school, you often don't know what's happening. So I always appreciate it. And even if you do have kids, I learn things that I didn't know were happening. Anything else? Great. With that, we will move on to the superintendent's report with Dr. Mary Perry-Reed.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen. Well, like Manuel said, it's MCA testing season, and we really hope that all of our students who are testing are giving their best effort. Each MCA exam takes 2 to 3 hours to complete, and I just wanted our community to understand how intensive these tests actually are. The tests are given to 3rd through 8th graders, and then our sophomores and juniors. And really, these test scores reflect not just what students know and are able to do, but also they're reflective of each student's testing stamina and their ability to apply persistence and grit during the moments where they either feel overwhelmed or confused or fatigued. So I just want to thank all of our students for really leaning into these exams, knowing that we are not a district that defines any student, class, school, or our system by a single test score, but the tests are important and do give us information about how well we're doing to prepare our students for the future. So we really want to just lift up our students during this time, and also thank our data specialists, our test proctors, for organizing these exams. It's a pretty significant lift for our system. Want to congratulate Alice Smith Elementary for putting on their 3rd annual musical, Willy Wonka, with its huge cast, brought 4 different audiences into a chocolate wonderland, and it was a huge success. Principal Navidad credited co-directors Adam Haybison and Ben Purcell, as well as Alice Smith, musical mom Eileen, for their amazing coordination and passion. These 3 staff members have been working with their entire school community for 3 years now to build a tradition of theater excellence. So congrats to Alice Smith. Alice Smith also recently hosted their annual Heritage Festival. This is an evening full of family fun and learning, featuring ethnic food from a variety of cultures, an authentic Indian dance performance, a cultural fashion show with students and staff dressed up from around the world, as well as students showcasing their learning and projects. So if you'll notice on this slide deck, the yellow and lavender quilt that was stitched by piecing together dyed cloth masks from COVID. And I didn't ask, but I'm sure the masks were quadruple washed in extra hot boiling water with lots of detergent before being used for this project. And by the way, this quilt was designed and made by our multilingual students at Alice Smith. An HEF grant funded a Little Free Library project at Glen Lake. I'm not sure if the kids know this, but I learned that Little Free Libraries has its own website, and the site shares that by 2016, more than 50,000 Little Free Libraries had been installed across the U.S., 50 U.S. states and 70 other countries. So it's really a thing. At Glen Lake, 12 little libraries are being constructed and painted by our 5th graders in the school's basement, which I did learn about and visit for the first time last week. And the little libraries will be installed across the Glen Lake attendance area. As a side note, our fifth graders at Glen Lake are heading to Wolf Ridge Environmental Learning Center tomorrow. This trip is very unique and special for every fifth grade class, and we're really lucky to be a community where our students get these kinds of experiences. So I want you to imagine every wall in Glen Lake Elementary School being adorned by student art, such as the two photos that you see on this slide. Staff at Glen Lake are still talking about last Thursday's arts showcase that generated a ton of buzz and pride for student work. Families were amazed to see and hear student artwork and performances, and Principal Radel credited specialists, instructors Angie Ireland and Brad Bradshaw for the significant time and effort in making this event happen. And featured in that center photograph, you'll see students in Miss Ireland's class sketching, drafting initial sketches for clay bobbleheads that they're going to make. And I really loved the Spider-Man one and the bright pink fish bobblehead sketches. If you didn't visit 8th grade students showcasing and presenting their IB community and action projects, you definitely missed a great event. The two presentations that I sat in on were why we should have chickens at West Middle School and domestic violence in the Twin Cities. And I also noticed that when students get to choose what they'd like to study, they're really focused on their learning and often have a lot of fun along the way. And both of these presentations culminated in a digital game where the listening audience members had to pass a quiz showing that they actually listened. Also at West Middle School was a school-wide dance. Just this last Friday, students had a shortened class schedule on Friday, and then a dance at the end of the school day. Kim Campbell, Danny Vanderlinde, and Maria Powers were the main organizers, and the staff worked together to make sure that none of the students left the premises during the dance, which is a thing for middle schoolers to maybe try to leave. But they had so much to do. They had the dance, there was a photo booth with props, a bingo room, basketball in the structure, or just walking around with friends. So it looked like staff and students were having a great time. Here is a big highlight. 53 band and orchestra juniors and seniors just returned from a memorable trip to Costa Rica. Out of the many, many trip highlights, here are a few. 11 students got passports for the first time. 2 had never flown before. 13 Juntos students provided Spanish translation and concert introductions in Spanish. This was not only to put their fluency to good use, but also because all rehearsal instruction during the trip was in Spanish. Students reconnected with the Costa Rican peers that they themselves had hosted earlier this school year. Students performed 3 times in 3 different concert settings and learned 9 new pieces of music. Costa Rican students expressed appreciation for the opportunity to work with our female directors, Ms. Tycast and Ms. Swigum, as well as having exposure to new pieces, including music by Black composers. All students participated in 4 adventurous activities, many for the first time, including whitewater rafting, zip lining, outrigger canoeing, I don't know what that is, and snorkeling in the Pacific Ocean. So it sounds like these students and their chaperones had an amazing time. So we want to really thank and lift up Nora Tycast and Allie Swigum, and I'm sure there were other people working to organize this trip. And of course, thank you to Principal Ballard and other principals who make sure that our students have access to really, really great learning opportunities. At the high school, National Signing Day also happened. 9 of our scholar athletes were recognized and celebrated last Wednesday. National Signing Day has traditionally been the first day that a high school senior can sign a binding NLI, or a National Letter of Intent, for a collegiate sport with a D1 or D2 school that belongs to the NCAA. And every year across the country, about 48,000 high school seniors sign these letters. And in Hopkins, we were able to celebrate 9. So congratulations to Mel, Maya, Bryn, Savannah, DeMarco, Amelia, Mia, Avery, and Anthony. Hopefully I said all of their names correctly. This week, we are celebrating our school-age care professionals across our 6 elementary sites. Glen Lake Principal Radel shared the following celebratory message in his email to staff. As you know, our kids and company staff are absolutely amazing. They are critical supports and trusted adults during many of our students' days. They exhibit love, patience, energy, fun, creativity, and purpose while working with our students to create a phenomenal experience. Many commit to joining our school-wide house gatherings to contribute to our building's vision. Without this essential program and committed staff, many of our families would be forced to think of an alternative before or after care solution. So thank you to all of our before and after school professionals. We really appreciate you. A group of Hopkins educators, math teachers, coaches, leaders, all driven by their passion for high-quality math instruction and education, participated in the Minnesota Council of Teachers for Mathematics annual conference a couple of weeks ago. Gatewood math coach and teacher Tracy Beaverson also presented at this conference, and our math specialist and teachers reported that the professional learning that they engaged in during this time confirmed that in Hopkins we are headed in the right direction with our K-12 Hopkins math framework. We're ahead of the curve that others are still navigating. So that gave us a great dose of confidence, and we're grateful for those individuals who committed some time attending the conference. Speaking of professional development and attending conferences, our director of IDL and I attended the ASU, Arizona State University, plus GSV, Global Silicon Valley conference for 3 days last week. And this is a conference for education leaders, instructional education leaders, and also tech ed leaders. And if resources were not a barrier, this is a professional learning that I would want to send my entire cabinet, principals, and our tech specialists to. It is a premier education conference, and the sessions, the content, the speakers are leading edge, very innovative, and extremely altruistic in their collective mission to transform education so that every young person across the world has access to instruction, information, and technology that sets them up for success. So Ann and I took several pages of notes, and we look forward to sharing some reflections in the May Leader Memo. One of the sessions that I attended was a talk with Dr. Linda Darling Hammond. She's a longtime education researcher at Stanford. She's one of many thought leaders and researchers for the Learning Policy Institute, an organization that focuses on research-based priorities that lead to increased student learning and successful schools. And I shared with a few of our principals that as leaders of the Hopkins school system, and that's all of you as board members, cabinet, school leaders, and our teacher leaders, we should feel very affirmed and validated that we are doing the right work. As you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, these are the 10 features that should be seen in a system that is focused on improving student learning for each and every student. So, of course, we still have a ways to go because we need to have these priorities and efforts lead to transformed student outcomes, right? But it is really great to know that we're headed in the right direction and that we're implementing all of the right things. And I just want to credit our leaders and all of our staff for working on these right things. And then finally, I do want to acknowledge that this board meeting is being conducted during Seder, which is part of the Jewish Passover. In Hopkins, we're trying to be thoughtful about religious equity, which includes not scheduling events that compete with holy days or other times when our families are unable to participate. So we will keep working at this, and I want to apologize to our Jewish staff and families. And with that, I will take any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Mary Perry Reed. I agree. Any comments or questions for?
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
Dr. Mary Perry Reed / Natalia, could you go back to that slide right before the Seder message? This is like uncanny. It's like somebody came into our district, observed what was happening, and made a list of features. I mean, the alignment between what we've been doing for the past 6 years and these best practices is just like clear as day. So how exciting to be there with a national thought leader and just be assured that we're on the right track.
It really is good news, and it's not by accident, right? So there's nothing that we're introducing or implementing in Hopkins that is being done without the proper investment in research and making sure that the priorities are evidence-based or there are proof points for these things in this country and across the world. So we're trying to be very intentional with all the things and all of the right things.
It's fantastic.
To follow up on that, do we all have a copy of this? So
I
that we
can, yeah, there's a whole, I'll send you the link to the website and then I can send you a couple of reports.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
Yes, more of a comment just on about the MCAs, I would encourage parents to go take a look and see what their, what the subjects and some kind of practice questions for the MCAs. I actually did that for 3rd grade for my children, and I was, impressed or struck by how difficult they were. Right? It's not easy stuff. It's like they're already doing angles and the stuff being parallel and perpendicular and acute and obtuse angles and everything at 3rd grade. So, I think people think about it in the abstract and they're like, well, this, that, and the other thing, but it's not easy. So parents really should go take a look.
Thank you for that. I also, too, just being in the schools and seeing the preparation and the amount of staff resources that get poured into these tests, I think it's important for parents to know as well. I know that our tech person was juggling around different priorities so that they could be available when the tests were being taken, because that is another strain on school resources when these tests are being given. So I think it's important that we all are aware of how much resources as well as our student capacity is stretched pretty thin right now for testing. Anything else?
Is it all right if I make a comment?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that, on the topic of being inclusive surrounding religion, I think Hopkins has been doing really well. As a student who isn't Christian, I know that my family was really excited. I think it was just a little bit ago that we celebrated Eid, and we got a day off. So that was really amazing. I know my little sister ran through the house. She was like, "We have Eid off!"
Oh, that makes me happy.
Yeah, and I know that in my family we've had a lot of struggles with that. My older sibling doesn't go to the school, and they either had to have a bunch of missing work or work on a holiday. So, yeah, I think it's really amazing that Hopkins is working on that.
Thank you. Well, with that, thank you for a good report. It was comprehensive, and it's always nice to see things that are going on across the district. With that, I would look for a motion to approve our agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. The agenda is approved. And on the agenda next is the consent calendar. The purpose of this is to approve items that are provided, that are giving the board information considered to be more routine in nature. Things like contracts, bids, policies, and second reading. If any member of the board deems an item to be necessary for additional discussion, a motion can be made to move that item to new business. I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes and consent calendar is approved. And that takes us to the next part of our agenda, which is the treasurer's report. Treasurer Heartland.
Certainly, thank you. Good evening, everybody. And to introduce my report and lead our general financial discussion tonight, I wanted to highlight a topic reported by KARE 11, Pioneer Press, NPR, among other local news stations, and that's that 70% of only Minnesota's metropolitan school districts are facing a collective $300 million shortfall this budgeting cycle. And that's due partially to additional earmarks for state and federally mandated programs. And I wanted to highlight just one example of those new mandates, and that would be the READ Act. And I know people have heard about the READ Act before, or letters before, and to clarify, neither of those are curriculum that a school has to adopt. One's, the READ Act is the law, and letters is one of the programs that teachers can take to learn the science of reading. And according to the Association of Metropolitan School Districts, it's going to cost Hopkins schools approximately $278,000. And so of the budget that we get from the state of Minnesota, approximately that much money is earmarked in Hopkins alone for the institution of that program. And Hopkins was a little bit ahead of the curve on this and sent teachers 4 letters certification in advance of it being required by the state. And we sent some of our teachers so early that they may not qualify for full reimbursement of those, the dollars that the Hopkins School District spent to educate those teachers. And unlike other school districts who possibly waited until now when it's mandated, they will have those costs covered in full. And that is just one way that our dollars are being spent, even when you hear about how much money was given or invested in public education last year. So many of those dollars has these requirements that are logistically complicated and expensive and take a lot of time to implement. Our legislators are still mid-session, and because this is a policy year, not a financial year, there's little indication that there's much pending that will have a large impact on our district's current budget cycle. The session's constitutionally mandated to end by May 20th, and according to our Hopkins Schools LAC, it seems likely that that will happen and not require a special session, and that would mean we'll end our school year, all of us in community, knowing about what the revenue picture from the state of Minnesota is. Anyone who has looked at the check register might notice our budgetary period was shorter than normal. These budgetary periods are really dependent on the board's schedule. It kind of depends on when our meetings are, and therefore when open meeting laws dictate our agenda must be posted and exactly what date our support staff requests the check register. And so all of those factors combined mean that sometimes our periods are like this one, 9 days long, and sometimes they're 34 days long.
In just this 9-day period, the district paid invoices totaling over $38,360 to just one of our substitute teacher staffing agencies, Teachers on Call. Other agencies that I did not include in this week's report are Sunbelt Staffing, Bilingual Therapies, Soliant Health, and others. We paid $4,725 to Xcel Energy for electrical service at just one of our schools, and spent $136,193 on regular and special education-related transportation. We spent $12,000 to complete a Hopkins district resident survey, and coordinating that and collecting the results is not cheap. Additionally, we spent just over $12,000 to Nystrom Publishing for that winter 2024 mailer we all received. Approximately half of that cost was the actual printing, and approximately half of that was the postage. Snow events on March 20th, 24th, and 25th, and their associated snow clearing and then later salting cost a total of $47,000. And to clarify, those events happened prior to this period, but we paid the invoices during this period. And with that, I move that we approve total disbursements in the amount of $864,468.35 for the period of April 3rd to April 11th, 2024.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The treasurer's report is passed, and I really appreciate that you are back, Treasurer Hartland, to read those numbers. And that moves us on to new business. We will be discussing our revised fiscal year 24 budget and preliminary approval of the fiscal year 24 through 25 budget. And I will turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry-Reed.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen. And welcome to the table, Director Chapanduka. So I'll provide just a hopefully quick framing, and then we have a presentation for our board members and community, and look forward to your questions. So I'd like to start by thanking the members of our Legislative Action Coalition for all of the financial and policy advocacy that they engage in at the state capitol on behalf of Hopkins schools. I also want to express gratitude to our legislators for their commitment to public education and for the 6% increase over 2 years that was recently legislated. At the same time, it's very important to acknowledge that given very steep cost increases in public school districts, the 6% over 2 years, 4% this year, 2% next year, does not meet current and future needs. And this gap is significant. Thus, we in Hopkins, and as Treasurer Hartland mentioned, most other districts remain in a very challenging place with our fiscal resources. I also want to share with everyone that in Hopkins, under the guidance of our Director of Business Services, we have spent our ESSER dollars very wisely, and this has actually worked to mitigate our current negative impact. And still, $4.5 million in reductions is very painful, very difficult. It's hard to do this without impacting positions. In identifying reductions and efficiencies, our primary goal has been to protect classroom teachers and core instruction to the greatest extent possible. And we're also trying to be strategic, but also conservative, because we know that we're going to be facing additional reductions during next school year. So how can we look at our budgets now and make the reductions that seem to make the most sense, as well as be forward thinking into that next fiscal year. Regarding our media center staffing, and I want to thank our students who showed up during open agenda earlier, and also thank our media professionals who are in the audience tonight and maybe listening in. I want to acknowledge that our school board asked for the superintendent and her cabinet to find a way to reduce the impact. And so what was originally communicated was reducing the library media specialists and also transform the role into digital literacy specialists to the tune of moving 4 to 6 full-time individuals forward into the next school year. We did go back to the drawing board and we did find a way to reduce the reduction. So we are currently committing to a minimum of 6 versus 4 and up to 8 digital literacy specialists to ensure that our media centers continue to be thriving places. And I realize that this is a very difficult topic and decision given how much we all love and have personally benefited from our library media spaces, but also trying to be thoughtful about, okay, how can we make reductions, also move toward transformation while protecting classroom teachers. And so it has been quite a challenging scenario to navigate. And we don't want to revisit this particular conversation next year. We really want to make a decision that we think we can sustain over time. So that's a very important thing to remember. So I'm not going to speak, to other specific programs or staff because some of that will come up in the presentation, but I did, out of respect and honoring the folks who are in the space, want to speak specifically to our media professionals. And then I think with that, I'll turn it over to you, Director Chapanduka, to begin preparing the slide deck, and then we'll see what questions our board members have.
Thank you, Dr. Miri. Again, good evening, Board Chair Andreessen, respective board members in the community. First of all, I would definitely want to thank all the leaders and staff who have been participating and making these tough choices and decisions which are very impactful to our community. We are also trying to leverage, different resources we have in the system based on some of the savings we have seen over time. So the first thing I would do is around this time of the year, we do present to the board a revised budget, which will lead to the preliminary budget for fiscal year 25. So what I have is that revised budget presentation, which definitely we have factored in a lot of components, as previously alluded by the superintendent. If it wasn't for the fact that we were very intentional and strategic in how we used our ESSA dollars, we would have faced a budget deficit this year, putting into consideration the labor bargaining agreements and how they ended up costing. So we were able to shift resources to be able to avoid any dipping into fund balance for fiscal year 24, knowing that we're facing bigger challenges for fiscal year 25 and potential discussions as we move towards fiscal year 26 and beyond. So what I have is the general fund, and I know when we initially did the presentation to the board back in June, we presented a structurally balanced budget for fiscal year 24. At that point in time, we didn't know what our impacts were in terms of the cost of living adjustment. So when we presented to the board based on what the Citizen Financial Advisory Committee it recommended, we presented a 3% cost of living adjustment. That 3% ended up leading to different outcomes when you look at our bargaining units, for example, with HEA, because we're behind. So when you look at an average of about 11% increase, which factors in this year into next year, a 3% ended up being a 5%. So that definitely would have led to a budget deficit across our system of about $2 million. So what we've done is we've leveraged some of our ESSA resources to be able to cover for that gap. So what I have is the revised budget, which moved us from a $123 million revenue budget and $123 million expense budget, factoring in some of the ESSA dollars. We are presenting a revised budget of about $130 million, which factors in those ESSA dollars, which factors in any other grants we received, which were not factored in at the initial adoption of the budget, as well as expenditures which are a combination of cost of living adjustments or any other increases we've seen on the market. So our total expenditures are a little over $130 million. So we are anticipating a structurally balanced budget for fiscal year 24. And so in terms of the federal dollars, and we have to spend these dollars by September of 2025, but the majority of the expenditures have to happen between the beginning of our fiscal year, which was July, and the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30th. We do have some summer programs which happen after the end of the fiscal year in July, August. So we are going to leverage some of these dollars to be able to fund some of the summer programs so that it doesn't really have an impact on the deficit we're already facing for fiscal year 25. So an additional of $4.2 million in ESSA, which was allocated to kind of mitigate on the deficit we would have potentially faced, which would have come out of the fund balance, has been factored into the expenditure and revenue structure. For food service, when we actually did the budget, we had budgeted about $3.9 million with a potential expenditure of about $3.8 million, which would have left us with about a surplus of $70,000. Due to the universal meals, and this is the first year the district is doing this outside of the programs we actually used during the pandemic. So we have been trying to be very careful in terms of managing the volume of meals being served across breakfasts and lunches. What we have seen is that there's been greater participation, mostly around breakfast, and increased participation for lunches, which is leading to additional resources coming into the district. So our revised budget is $4,238,578 for revenue, and expenses of $4,184,649, which leaves us with about a $53,929 surplus. And part of the impact which we have identified in terms of food services, in the past, for example, concessions, they used to be managed by food services. In the last year, we had an audit with Minnesota Department of Education Nutrition Services, and then they informed us that there's new requirements that concessions should not be managed by food services. So what we've done, we have moved concessions to be managed by our athletics department, which is a revenue reduction to the budget. Last year, we also had some challenges around staffing, so that did impact our a la carte. We restarted our a la carte this year in March, so the revenue is lower than we would have anticipated if we had run that program throughout the whole entire year. Can you go to the next slide? For community education, a slight difference between what we had initially budgeted at the beginning of the fiscal year and some slight changes, a little over a couple $100,000. So initially budgeted about $11,101,326 in revenue. Our new revised budget is $11,172,580. Expenditures, we had initially budgeted $11,064,462. Our revised budget for community education is $11,172,580, which leaves community education with a structural balanced budget. So that is what I have for the revised budget. If there are no questions, I can move on to our preliminary budget. So for the preliminary budget, this is just a continuation of the conversations we had on March 26th, where we kind of presented some of the reductions. Currently, we are in the process of starting our budget tie-outs. So I would like to start with some of the priorities we've put into perspective and discussion when it comes to our budget for fiscal year 25, as well as what we are prioritizing at the program level. That being said, I want to give the superintendent the opportunity to kind of take us through some of those priorities, which we initially presented to CFAC, and they're also documented in the CFAC report, which are actually helping and bringing the framework of how we are allocating resources both at the building level and at the department level.
Thank you, Mr. Chapanduka. So as our director mentioned, we partner with the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee in the beginning stages of this budgeting process, and part of that work involves being really clear on what our instructional priorities are. And as a school district, because teaching and learning is our primary function, right, it's our core work, then we want to be very clear about what are we trying to achieve with teaching and learning, and how does that inform our budget, because we want to make sure that our resources are aligned with our instructional priorities. So we do work with our Innovation, Design, and Learning Director and her team, and also our operations leaders, to identify, okay, here have been the priorities for previous years. Which priorities are we continuing? Are we sunsetting any priorities? How are we ensuring that our priorities are research-driven, just as I talked about in the superintendent report earlier, and trying to be as specific as possible, but of course at a high level, because you don't want to see a slide with like 52 bullets, right? So of course for our primary elementary learners, early learning through grade 5, we want to provide strong Tier 1 instruction for all of our students. That includes letters-informed literacy instruction, strong math instruction, and exposure to enrichment in their learning and lots of other things. We want to also provide strong Tier 1 instruction for our secondary students. We also want to continue providing mental health and wellness supports for our students, which means that we need to staff our schools appropriately with the professionals that have the expertise to provide those mental health and wellness supports, and that's at all levels of our system. As you saw in this slide during my superintendent report, the schools and systems that are focused on best practices, and I will call them next practices, also are intentional about restorative culture and practices. So that is a priority at the elementary and secondary level. And of course, we are seeing not only increased numbers of students qualifying for special education services, but also increased intensity and frequency of those needs. And so we need to make sure that our specialized services department and programs are funded appropriately, knowing that our families want choice and voice and flexibility and options. Continuing to prioritize and fund our virtual and blended EDU model is very, very important. So a few secondary mentions include committing to smaller class sizes, grades 6 through 12. We did have a significant issue this year with many of our classes at 30, 32, 36, right? And we need to set our students and teachers up for success. It costs more to have lower class sizes, but we wanted to put that as an instructional priority. We also want to make sure that our secondary students, including our sixth graders, have access to high quality after school activities and athletics. And in the operational space, you'll see, sorry for the small font on this slide, but on the operational side, you'll see that we are implementing a new enterprise resource planning system called Oracle. That is a heavy lift on behalf of our business services, HR, and IT departments, but once this is implemented, it will streamline our services and give staff information at their fingertips. We are also doing a lot of work to prepare for a capital projects bonds referendum, knowing that we have safety and security upgrades we need in our schools. All high schools are yearning for vaping detection systems. All schools are desiring, and communities are desiring, integrated and sophisticated technology-based safety and security systems, so that cameras are connected with external doors, are connected with devices, and we can make sure that we're keeping our staff and students safe. So additionally, on the operational list, you'll see a focus on adult culture of wellness and engagement. That's not really an operational thing, but we need to operationalize a system for ensuring that our adults have access to wellness activities and experiences. And we're also intentionally focusing on improved onboarding. And the last thing is transportation, wanting to make sure that our students who need busing services to and from school have service that gets them there and back safely, but also that we're providing those services with as much efficiency as possible. Transportation is a very expensive endeavor. So those are just a few of our most important instructional and operational priorities. And then I think that leads us to the next slide, where Teruro's this year's slide, where you'll talk about, okay, so once we talk with our CFAC committee about all these priorities, then they take those into consideration as they're looking at enrollment and state funding and all the other things that then inform the budgeting parameters.
Thank you, Dr. Mapere. Yes, so based on those priorities and objectives, and this information has already been shared with the board a couple times, and these are the parameters we used when we started planning and putting the budget together. One factor is around revenue, so we factored in a 2% increase to our basic student allowance. In fiscal year 25, we are still monitoring. The legislature has moved to fiscal year 26, but based on the language which was provided, we are anticipating maybe around another 2% in fiscal year 26. So we'll just have to be very objective in terms of priorities as we move forward from a long-term perspective. We also factored in flat enrollment in fiscal year 25 based on trends and what we have seen. This flat enrollment projection is actually for the foreseeable future, but we are also working diligently behind the scenes in terms of marketing and innovations around either retaining students from within the district or bringing more students to the district. We also factored in a 5% increase on cost of living adjustment for fiscal year 25 based on negotiated contracts with our different bargaining units, which we have seen have kind of skyrocketed across different school districts in Minnesota. So that also had an impact for Hopkins Public Schools. Our fringe benefits remained flat at 42%, so we didn't anticipate any increases there. We factored in a 5% increase around purchase services, utilities, transportation, and supplies. And also made sure that we maintain an optimal fund balance, knowing that our fund balance is around the 12% mark on an unassigned fund balance, which will definitely leverage in terms of adding more resources into our buildings. So those were the parameters we used in terms of building the budget, which led us to making some reductions and leveraging some of our fund balance to be able to at least lessen the impact in our buildings when it comes to adult to student ratios. As you know, and I've kind of already addressed it in terms of enrollment being the driver of revenue coming into the district, as well as using it as a tool for allocating resources. So the graph you're seeing, which we have shared in the past, is still the same information. Project a flat enrollment across multiple years. We constantly monitor enrollment, and we've been spending time looking at how we refine it so that it becomes more informative in terms of resource allocation. So we are still anticipating flat enrollment, although we may come back to the board later on if things change or if we start to see different trends. The next slide, again, we've shared this information when it comes to the general formula allowance. If you look at how the state is funded our basic per student over the years, and then you factor in inflation and compounding, which leaves a gap of about $1,356. And I know earlier on I was just kind of, working with our assistant director, and we're trying to figure out, like, okay, what does $1,356 per ADM mean if we were getting these dollars with the current enrollment? It amounted to almost $10 million. So if we're getting these dollars, our problems would probably be solved. But we know that we probably won't be able to get enough of these dollars to be able to at least optimally fund education in Minnesota. But that's the dilemma we are facing. The next slide is just a breakdown of our general fund revenue. Funding is so complex in Minnesota. We have over 39 formulas for calculating different funding, and most of it is defined at the state level. So I have a breakdown of our revenue sources, starting with our basic revenue allowance, which accounts for about 43.6% or $54.7 million, which is part of that general student allowance. I have about 16.6% or 19.2 million, which are state aids and levies. About 10% or 12.7 million, that's our special education. 6.5% or $8 million is our general education aid. About 15 million or 11.4% is our operating referendum. 4.1% or 5.6 million is our local optional revenue, which is board approved. 2.6% or $3.1 million is our federal grants and aid. About 4.1% or 5.1 million is our restricted revenue. And then we have other revenue, about 1.2% or $1.3 million from private donations and other sources. So total revenue for fiscal year 25, we are looking at $125,070,914. Then we also have to factor in the $3 million we are moving from fund balance to the general fund, which leads to a total revenue of $128,070,914. Expenditures, about 56% are salaries and wages, which is about $71.7 million. 23.5% benefits, which amounts to about $30 million. 14.8% purchase services, which amounts to about $18.9 million. 2.9% for supplies, which amounts to about $3.7 million. 1.5% capital expenditures, which amounts to about $1.9 million. 1.3% relates to other expenditures, which amounts to about $1.6 million. For total expenditures of $128,070,914. So initially, when we had actually presented this information to the board, and we had anticipated a $4.5 million deficit. So what we did so that we actually align our revenue to our expenditures, first of all, before we tapped any funds from the fund balance, we went ahead and identified expenditures which we needed to reduce. We identified those expenditures, reduced our budget by those expenditures, ended up with a structurally balanced budget. But the structurally balanced budget wasn't enough to fund all the needs in our buildings and programs. And that's the reason why we ended up going into fund balance to identify $3 million, which we distributed to buildings for them to able to close the gap or use as priorities. Again, this is one-time funding, which we need to come back sooner and identify what this will look like going in fiscal year 25-26, because those dollars are gone. So that's what we did, and definitely we have more conversations around what next steps looks like. But once we identify all those elements, we also went ahead and started calculating in terms of what are direct allocations to school, what are allocations which are considered to be district-wide. So the next slide, if you can go the next slide, Alice. So the next slide, I don't know if you're on the correct slide. Okay, go to the next one. Yeah, thank you. So the next slide actually just shows a breakdown between direct allocations to buildings. So right now, I have about 58% of our allocation going directly to buildings in terms of predictable staffing model, or allocations which are categorical, or allocations which are discretionary. About 37% goes to district-wide allocations, and these are services and programs, including transportation, some of our custodian work, our operations and maintenance, all fall within these categories. And then about 5% or $6.4 million is department allocations. Those are the departments who support buildings in terms of, for example, business services with payroll, our accounts payable, with human resources, with the centralized staff for innovation, design, and learning, centralized staff for special services. So all those fall within those categories. So that's what I have for general fund. The next slide is our preliminary budget for food services. So for food services, our revenue projected $4,259,756, and our expenditures are $4,393,881, which leads to a deficit of about $134,126. And we'll continue refining one food service since it's driven by participation. So we have seen an increase in participation, but we are also trying to be conservative in terms of since this is the first year, which we have seen the funding being different from a universal meal standpoint. We'll continue to monitor the trends, and then if there's a need for adjustments, we'll make adjustments and bring this back to the board during either the revised budget later in April next year. And for community education, our community education revenue projected is $12,355,131, and expenses are projected at $12,355,131, sorry, leaving a structural balanced budget for community education. That's all I have for now. I will take any questions.
Thank you so much for that update and for the detailed information. Any questions or comments for Director Chapanduka?
Chair Andreessen.
Yes.
So no big surprises anywhere here tonight for me. Certainly with the fiscal year 23-24, we had been made aware of the concessions issue earlier this year, and so no concerns there at all. I guess I just have a couple contextualizing comments, really. So if we go back to slide 7, that has the allocation priorities and objectives. I just want to lift up how these are really aligned with our community's expectations of us from what we've heard as board members, engaging with community members, how they are absolutely aligned with Vision 2031 and where we are in the implementation of that right now. And what you've done here with this budget, aligning it to community priorities, to data-driven best practices like we heard about during Dr. Mary Perry Reed's presentation earlier this evening, in the face of a potential structural deficit, right? That we've had to completely restructure our budget in a short period of time. I think this work has been monumental. I think your ability to be agile and respond to the board's request to take another look at the media center specialists, at that structure, was very responsive, and I'm looking forward to a yes vote tonight. So thank you. An aye vote, I should say.
That's right. We don't do yes here.
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
Yeah, it's more of a comment. We've had lots of conversations with the administration and Director Chetman-Duga, and I think as you outlined tonight, you found some savings, and we went from worst case we would only have 4 to maybe probable or best case we maybe have 8. So I think that's a significant savings to the department and to staffing. I think you've kind of had those conversations and kind of proven out that we are not able to have any more savings without impacting kind of the priorities that Jen alluded to. And so, I think it's always, I think the budget, we're still always looking at it, but I'm comfortable with these levels. So, I wanted to say I appreciate you looking for those savings so we can keep libraries as a vibrant and safe place as so many of our community members have talked about. Thank you.
Chair Andreessen?
Yes, Treasurer Hartland.
Thank you. I also wanted to extend a quick thanks for your stewardship, not only in this, but even going back to fiscal year 24 and ensuring that any additional expenditures were covered by reserve ESSER dollars and seeking additional grants and leaving our unassigned fund balance alone, given that our fiscal year 25 budget requires dipping into that. And so it was relieving to see that our updated 24 numbers did not require any such action. And then one thing that I did want to point out and thank admin and your team is, as a board goal, we've wanted to make the budgeting process more useful, make it more transparent, and I went back to our documentation from last year for this report for fiscal year 24 at this time, and I think that this report for this year, 25, does provide me a lot more just clear, instantly usable information, and recommend that our community take a moment to look at it. Really genuinely interesting information about like a building by building breakdown is available, and it talks directly about the enrollment at each site and the buildings and special programming that is there. And this is, I mean, it's a work in progress, right? Always to make the budgeting process and our talks here at the table more useful and more transparent, but I think this was an excellent step forward, and I appreciate this work. I had one question as I was going back and reviewing fiscal year 2024's report. All of the projections given in this report are up by something like 50 to 75 students per year, and I was wondering if that's changes either in Marcom or in programming that we did, or if that's better modeling, or what accounts for that difference?
Yeah, so when we're coming into fiscal year 24, we had the great configuration, so that kind of threw us off a little bit in terms of what we were anticipating and how we have always projected in the past. So we're very conservative. And then now we have seen the trends, because when we started to see the students coming in, because we are using projections to plan, and then we start to see students coming in, which actually drives the revenue coming into the district. So we went back and re-looked at things and said, well, now that we know what we've retained in terms of students when we moved from the kindergarten to 6th grade model, into kindergarten to 5th grade, and then the 6th to 8th, and the 9th to 12th. There are certain movement we've seen which made us adjust those projections, and that's why you're seeing some of those differences. But then going into the future, just as we start to look at some of the historical trends in terms of mobility and some of the competition we see on the market. That's why we are trying to be very conservative in terms of the enrollment being flat. But at least when we projected numbers for the current fiscal year, we're very conservative. Sure. And now we can tell the trends, and we are probably back to where we were in the last few years before the pandemic, and that's probably that's why you're seeing some of those shifts and differences.
Sure, I appreciate that information, and I do still see that it's largely projected
to be flat, but it is projected to be flat at a higher number, which is great for us. So thank you for that additional context. I was wondering quickly, because the cost of substitutes is something that I've highlighted quite a bit, and does the math on that work out to expand in-building substitutes, or are we just hesitant to say that we're hiring for that position, given that we're making other staffing hard decisions?
Yeah, so, Dr. Mary Pirit or Dr. Lightfoot can help with this. So in the past, when we actually budgeting for substitutes, we're being conservative. What we've seen is our substitutes run around 1.2 to about $1.5 million. So currently, we've been working on a different model in terms of how substitutes will be fed into the buildings. And we are still doing that work. So what we've done right now is we've just put a budget line item for substitutes, while at least we are working the modalities of how those dollars will be distributed to address any substitute needs in our system.
I see. So the specifics of that are still being determined to some extent.
Correct.
Okay.
Depending on grade level.
Okay. I think that does it for my questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions or comments? Well, I just wanted to, again, add my gratitude for the reports, the details, and all the work that goes into this, and all the conversations that are had and discussions across the district. I appreciate everyone who's engaging in this actively. And I did also just want to call out the slide that gives a historical look at education funding in the state. And I know you said this specifically, but I did the calculations while I was looking at this slide. And if funding had stayed the way it was back in 2003, we would have over $9 million more dollars per year in this district alone. And I think that we really need to take a look at that perspective every time we have these discussions, because we are I think that this presentation shows that we approach this with an abundance mindset. You started off looking at our objectives, our priorities, what we want for our district and for our community, and in particular, our students and families who we swear an oath to serve. And I appreciate that, but I also, when I see statistics like this and data like this, get frustrated that the state is not fulfilling its constitutional obligation to public education. So I appreciate all the work that's being done. I wish it didn't have to be done. What could we achieve if schools were fully funded? I think about that all the time. So thank you for the work and for entertaining my soapbox moment. And then I do also just wanted to get some clarity around a number. I saw 5% for, help me out here, on department allocations. Can you just remind us what those departments are? What it's my understanding from what you were saying that that's mostly admin, cabinet, and then the district-wide allocations. I know you said transportation. Just wondering to get some clarity around real things. Where would, say special education fall? Is that a direct school allocation or district-wide?
Yeah, so for example, with special education, we allocate the resources to the special education department, and then the special education department reallocate those resources to to the buildings. So what you are seeing right now in the allocations, those resources are sitting at the buildings. There is a small percentage of staff who are central office special education staff. Those are actually budgeted at the central office, and then they belong to the 5%. So any allocations which fed into the buildings, we are actually including as part of the building. So when you look at, for example, district-wide transportation, some of our benefits around other post-employment benefits, which are budgeted at the central office level, but they are benefiting staff in the buildings. Operations and maintenance, utilities, custodians, they are all budgeted at the central office, but the majority of staff are actually sitting at the buildings. So those are under district-wide. Then we have departments like the business office, HR, governance and management, superintendent's office, any central office staff who are probably in innovation and design and learning, those are accounted for at the central office. And then everything else is kind of feeding into the buildings.
Great, thank you. We appreciate that context. And then the deficit in the food service revenue, do we believe that that will kind of balance out? I know that even at the state level, they've been surprised at the amount of use, given the law of free meals that was passed, the funding too. It's a great problem to have, right? We need more funding because more kids are eating. But wondering how that pans out in Hopkins specifically.
Yeah, I totally believe so. I mean, in my conversations with our Director of Nutrition, in terms of the participation we've seen, and also looking into our bargaining agreement, food services, those are some of the hardworking staff who are probably lowly paid, and we also wanted to account for that when they came to the negotiations. So their cost of living adjustment also was above and beyond what we usually see. What we are trying to navigate right now is what else do we need to do to increase participation, because most of the funding is coming in through the universal meals. And I am totally convinced that we are getting more participation. And I know the Nutrition Service Department, they are doing everything they can to make sure that, they are on top of the quality food service they provide. I don't know if you have gone to the Nutrition Service Department. Now they have the meal viewer. We headed the board meeting the last few years that students wanted to know what nutrients are in the food they are eating. We were able to actually get an application which provides all those details, and I think that also has led to more students participating in the meal programs. They are also investing heavily in culturally relevant meals, farm to table. So there's a lot of work which has been done in nutrition services, which has led, my understanding is there's greater participation even at the elementary level with the breakfast, which used not to be the case before. So I think as we continue to innovate, we are going to end up with way more participation. So I feel like that gap can be closed. We are also trying to be very conservative since this is the first year, and we haven't even finished the year. So we are hoping that by the time we finish the year, we will get the actual numbers and then maybe use those to tweak or modify our budget.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes.
Before we vote, and to tag along with what you just said about how we're still very much in the budgeting process, and also in light of the board goal of having this be more transparent, can we talk just for a moment about what our vote tonight means and what's next in the budgeting process? For example, I know we'll hear a staffing resolution, so we will hear about the impacts of this budget to staff in the next 1 to 2 meetings, and we still have a final budget meeting coming up.
Sure. Yeah, what the vote means today is just to give leaders assurance to continue with the work we are doing, knowing that there are steps we have to take to bring back to the board until we get to adopt the budget in June. So this is the initial step, and then as we get more details, because what we do is we are budgeting at a high level, we allocate the resources to the buildings. The buildings start to do what we call a budget tie-out. And as they do the budget tie-out, that's where we will know the more specific details of what other additional priorities they have and how they are allocating those resources. And then we'll come back to the board with more details, more granulated details in May for our first board reading, and then our adoption in June. So this is just giving us the go-ahead to continue with the budget tie-out process and make sure that we are moving in the right direction.
I appreciate that context, yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Seeing no more questions, I'd look for a motion that the board approve and accept the fiscal year 2023-2024 revised budget and the fiscal year 2024-2025 preliminary budget.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you for
Thank you.
being here this evening and for your great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Rural.
Thank you.
And that brings us to policies in first read. I will turn it over to Vice Chair Ross.
Thank you. We're going to welcome Dr. Nick Lightfoot to the table, and we're going to be going over 4 policies in first read, policy 752, 754, 801, and 802. I'll give you the floor, Dr. Lightfoot.
Good evening. The Monitoring Committee has been moving through its segment of policies and has been identified. Those that were reviewed by the committee are up in front of the board this evening. The first of which is our purchasing policy. As you will note, there were no changes. This is a Hopkins policy that outlines statute and contains conditions specific within our organization. We would be available for specific questions regarding 752 if there are those that are available.
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. I don't have a specific question, but as treasurer, have taken some particular interest in some of these policies. And I note no changes, and the policies are pretty straightforward, and as you mentioned, follow model policies and statute. But some of the requirements around purchasing, such as if the cost of an item exceeds $25,000, that we are required to get more than one quote on it, and for large contracts, we're required to go through kind of a requisition process and then get sealed bids. And so it is potentially interesting for a community to know, or useful for a community to know, that we have rules and abide by some pretty strict rules around spending our money.
Yeah, to that point, I just wanted to call out, I'm a bit flummoxed why milk in particular is an exception, but in the purchasing agreement. It's just a little odd. I don't have any problem with it, just, I'm curious. But, yeah, except milk. Okay.
I'll ask Chad.
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
I do have a question for Dr. Lightfoot. The purchasing, does that, does it apply to like district credit cards, or like their purchase cards or anything like that? I don't really see that addressed at all. Is it just for
many
large?
of those have specific set limits, so that more of the, like when you look at the major purchases that are done, specific large item purchases, those have differentiated limits and processes in place to control exactly what you identify for. And certainly as we work in, as you've been hearing about some of the work with our Oracle system and requisitions and additional monitoring that we can do through that, that allows us to look specifically and make sure that all of these rules are applied accordingly within the system to purchases as well.
Okay. So is there a separate policy for purchase cards or?
Not necessarily. I mean, these are the statutory components that are identified in particular regarding those larger sets of purchases. Regarding the smaller ones that might be incidental purchases, those are held in those P card statuses that we have internal guidelines and internal uses for those specific or smaller item purchases.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I think we can go on to the next.
Sure. 704, salary deductions, tax sheltered annuities. We did make one modification here, a change under the regulation. We have allowed for lower amounts at entry points within salary deduction, and many of our labor agreements have matching contributions. That amount was just changed to reflect that. That is the only change into 754. There are additional questions. Happy to address those as well.
I don't see any.
All right. 801, equal access to school facilities. This is just a title change. As you will note, there have not been any recent changes since 2006 to this policy, and this is based on the Equal Access Federal Act. If there are questions related to that, happy to address those. All right. 702 is the disposition of equipment and materials. There were some changes that we did as a monitoring committee with this. As you will note, there were some revisions that were done on the model policy from the School Board Association. Part of that really identified in Section 8 exceptions for surplus school computers. We looked at the allowable components of that section that were newly added. We felt that those added value as well within the district, so included the inclusion of a charitable organization may bypass the requirements of competitive bidding. You will see that addition. And then as well, the possibility of under an adoption of a written resolution of the school board, the school district's ability to sell or give used computers to qualifying students at the price specified in the written resolution. Specifically, you will note in that section as well, the school must first qualify students whose families are eligible for free or reduced price meals, and then dispose of the remaining computers or tablets by lottery. That is a new allowable component, and we wanted to make sure that we reflected that in the Hopkins policy and included that language as well.
Chair Andreessen, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So for, I'm sorry, what policy? That's 805, you said?
802, the disposition of obsolete equipment and material.
802. So with that policy, basically, families can purchase like a refurbished computer from the school if we decide to sell them. Is that what that policy outlines?
Yeah, what you can do is that, and some of the components of the disposition, it requires competitive bidding for that specific item. For surplus school computers, as noted in Section 8, there are specific elements that can be delivered by a board, such that if you look at 2, which was the new addition, we may sell or give. So there are options there that the board could consider via resolution. And when we look at those surplus determinations, and if there are those items available, that was the specification of must be first delivered to those students who are free or reduced price meals. And then after that, it would be a lottery.
Okay, and since we have Apple computers, is there a process that we have to go through with Apple to sell those computers? Like do a percentage of those sales go to like Apple, or
No,
is
those
it
are
kind of-
district-owned items. So part of the disposition is that the sale, if you will, of those and the revenue that is raised goes directly back to the district. Generally for the use of purchasing new items in that same category.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
I do have a question. Dr. Lightfoot, do the computers get wiped before we dispose of them?
Yes, it's a technology process. When we look at all the refurbishing, Director Wetter can speak specifically to what that process is. But yes, that's a requirement to make sure that the computers are refurbished and brought forward in conditions to protect student data and any of the other district interest that would contain information that we would need to protect.
Okay, so, maybe I can follow up separately. We don't need to waste time with it.
I just had a quick question. I think it's great that we have this resolution piece where, families or students could purchase. I am just wondering if the monitoring committee discussed at all what that notification and/or communication process would be.
No, we in particular wanted to make sure that we had it added as the item. Certainly if the board approves this and we want to now have this as an option, we can bring this forward and then talk in more detail about its implementation.
Great.
Chair Andreessen, sorry, one more thing.
Yes.
Was it ever considered to let staff purchase the old equipment?
I think what you'll note here is the specifics under this section are governed by statute. So when you look at those that are allowable, you will see the statute reflected here, and that was the change. I don't believe that staff component is a portion of that. Specifically, the primary perspective here is that if you are looking to, you can either use the competitive bidding process, or it would be students whose families are eligible for free reduced price lunch.
Great. I think that's all the questions. Did we want to go ahead and discuss approving them like as a slate, or?
Sounds good.
Is that good for you,
Yeah.
Vice Chair Ross? Great. So I would look for a motion that the board approves the above policies in first read. Further, the board directs the administration to prepare the policies with no suggested revisions for approval in second reading at the next meeting as part of consent.
So moved, sorry.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
And that brings us to our board member reports. I would like to have us all introduce ourselves, and as we go around, we can give our reports for the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Would you like to start, Director Roper?
Sure. My name is Brooke Roper, and this is my first term on a board. I have 2 children in the district, and I am enjoying my experience so far. For a board report, I do just have a couple. One, I am hosting a panel on May 6th that is called Power Shifts. It is exploring the intersections of health and environmental injustice within urban communities, specifically focusing on the environmental neglect within the Twin Cities. And so I have a few key panelists on there, including Attorney General Keith Ellison, Executive Director T. McClinty from MN 350 is an organization over in Minneapolis that focuses on clean energy. We'll have our very own Mayor, Patrick Hanlon, who's also the Deputy Commissioner of Environmental Sustainability over at City of Minneapolis. We'll have Zamzam Muse. She is a clean energy expert and a program manager over at a organization called Regrow Agriculture. Regrow AG. And then I'll also have Joanne Hill. She is a fellow from Healthy Professionals for a Healthy Climate, and she's going to talk about, urban health and the intersections between environmental injustice. And also a community member named Gregory Wheeler who will talk about his experience with radon testing in his home. And so it's going to be a very good panel discussion, an introductory to the community about environmental injustice, especially for the Black community. I think it's going to be very, very important to get that conversation started ahead of climate change. And very excited to get into it. The next one is there is a scholarship that my friend has going on. It's called the Day of Remembrance in reflection for the murder of George Floyd. It's a scholarship for high school students who live in Minneapolis. And so my phone is not working right now. It's been off for the whole board meeting, but I've been trying to find the information online. I can send you all the link to send over to our high school students who may live in Minneapolis who wants to apply for it. I believe it is due either at the end of this month or either early May. So I'll get that over to you as soon as possible. And then also last 2 weeks ago, Dr. Mary Perry Reed and I got the chance to go out to visit a wonderful woman by the name of Sheila Thielen. She is the owner of Vestibular Training Services, and it specializes in vestibular training that concentrates on improving like the balance and your balance and what else? I'm sorry, what is it?
Sleep and academic focus.
Yes, thank you so much. Sleep and academic focus. We got to see her train some of her world-class Olympians. And she is a very powerful resource to connect with, especially trying to connect with her with more of the board members to go out to do her training, because it is an effective way to address autism. And also to address ADHD and, to improve the academics within our students. But it's also a great way to connect with balance and just to support with that, to support with the vestibular system that's located right in your inner ear. She works with all types. She has contracts with very prestigious entities such as the U.S. military and NBA and who else? She does work with NASA. She has a contract with Lifetime Fitness, and so really would love for you all to meet her one day and to hopefully bring them into the school system. So we'll discuss it. It's not a promise, but she is an amazing person, and I think that we all should experience the training. So those are all of my updates for tonight.
Director Roper, where is the panel taking place?
Oh, thank you. So the panel is taking place May 6th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at New Salem Baptist Church, New Salem Missionary Baptist Church in North Minneapolis. So fingers crossed, we can maybe get an electric school bus there. I'll keep you all posted, but it's not a guarantee so far, but fingers crossed that we'll have one there. So I'll give you all an update on that as well.
That will be a big draw.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, I'm Treasurer Rachel Hartland. I'm in my third year on the board, and I have 3 children who learn how to and are encouraged every day at Hopkins schools to use their voice to make change. I have a brief report. Last week, the 17th, was a digital learning day at the high school, and I attended a professional development learning fair at the high school. So on these digital learning days, when the students are receiving all of their education, mostly remotely, but via online, teachers and staff can do professional development. And on this day, staff members studied topics related to either their classroom or departments or relevant technologies and put together short presentations. And they alternated between either giving that presentation or walking around learning from their colleagues. I didn't have to make a presentation, so I got to learn a lot, including some efforts from the high school registration team, how they have made high school registration more equitable and are working very hard to ensure that families whose primary household language is not English get the relevant information at the exact same time as everyone else, so that those families aren't kind of caught unaware and registering behind another group of our students. I also learned that, at least for the classes studied for this particular presentation, teachers saw the same or very nearly the same amount of participation in their classes, whether students were in person for a typical learning day or off-site for a digital learning day. Additionally, I have participated in our LAC meetings with Director Roper and Chair Andreessen, and we're kind of in our monitoring and advising phase of the LAC season. LAC is the Legislative Action Coalition. This is where we watch the education-related bills that the legislature's debating, and we give our legislators advice or context when they ask us for it, and sometimes when they don't.
Good evening. I'm Rhoda Marie Puri-Reed, Superintendent, and I have already provided my superintendent update for our school board members and community. And additionally, I have a 6th grader at West and a high schooler. He's a sophomore, so I learned today, well, maybe I should have already known, but I learned that he took the MCA reading test today, and I hope he focused the entire time.
I too hope my sophomore focused during the MCA reading test. Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Andreessen. I am in my 5th year of service on the Hopkins School Board and parent a sophomore at the high school and a recent grad who is at the U of M, ending in May, actually, Twin Cities campus. And I wanted to share with my fellow board colleagues and the community that we are going to start our board retreat culture building with reading this book, Great on Their Behalf. And we will discuss it at our next workshop meeting, the sections, the introduction through chapter 3, and I will follow up with an email, but just so that you all can be sure that you'll have a really great discussion to tune into for our workshop next time. And that will get us through part 1 of the book. And we will we'll email out some questions so that you can all be thinking and having a great discussion at our next board meeting, which is May 7th. And I think that's all I have.
Z was just writing down the homework. He's trying to get an A.
Except he already read the book.
I'll read it again.
So we all have to read very carefully because then we're competing with
I'm
somebody
gonna
who's read
be-
it twice.
Yeah, I'm going to be grading you on testing things, so, yeah.
Good evening. My name is Jason Ross. I'm in my 3rd year on my first term. I have 3 kids that all attend at Tanglin Elementary, and my quick board report is I was participating in the carnival at Tanglin this past Friday. Not just attending, but I was actually working the volunteering at the event, talking to different families. They were in, that obviously go to the Tanglin School, and they're in the area. And yeah, it was a good turnout, good event, and a lot of cleanup afterwards. That was it.
Hi, I'm Jiming Zhao. I am in my first term on the school board. I've got 2 children that go to Eisenhower in the Xingxing School. I think my board update is around snacking at Eisenhower. I think, we talked about the meals being provided, but there's still need in the schools to have things for the kids to eat in the afternoon. And so we got a letter at the school board actually from a class at Eisenhower, and they said, there's still need, folks are still, some people are still hungry, and what can you do about it? So we kind of, so I got in touch with the Eisenhower PTO, and then also an NGO called Matter to provide some snacking. Right now, I think we're rolling it out, and it's in the kind of like figuring out like how much need is actually there. But the good news is kids are getting the nutrients that they need, and so that's good. I think there's a big shout out as well to the Eisenhower PTO, who's kind of approached it and are exploring with me and with all the figuring out what we need to provide. So I think Ashley Andrews, president of the PTO, is taking on a lot of that work. So really appreciate her work on the behalf of our kids at Ike. So thanks.
Hi, I'm Jen Westmoreland, she, her. I'm in the middle of my second term on the school board. I'm the old lady on the school board now. This is my 7th year, and I'm a proud graduate of Hopkins High School and have a 7th grader at West Middle School who is really wonderful, and we're having a really good week together, and I love them very much. So since our last meeting, I was a guest at the CARE Fellowship, which stands for Child Care Advocates Ready to Emerge. It's an advocacy and public policy learning cohort that has several co-sponsors, all organizations that deal with early childhood. So Child Care Aware of Minnesota, Minnesota Child Care Association, the Minnesota Association for the Education of Young Children, and Think Small. And each year they invite in elected officials at different levels of government to talk about our role in promoting early childhood education and how they can work with us and partner with us. So it was great. It was on Zoom, about a half-hour conversation, a lot of give and take, and really appreciated the invite. I'm looking forward next week to attending the Resource West annual fundraiser. So Resource West has been a great nonprofit partner for us here in Hopkins Schools. They recently moved locations. They're over by Mills Church now on Minnetonka Boulevard, and looking forward to supporting the continued success of this organization that supports so many of our Hopkins Schools families. Lastly, I've been engaging with a really great group of community members who care about safe and stable housing and creating an inclusive community. So we know that safe and stable housing is one of the key predictors of academic success. So that's why it's something that I've advocated for throughout my school board career. And there is a group called the Love Makes Room Coalition that has been doing some great work in Minnetonka around a specific affordable housing project there, but then of course looking to expand the presence of affordable housing in our community on a larger scale as well. So looking forward to supporting them at their upcoming Minnetonka City Council meeting, which is also on the 6th, I believe. So the 6th is a big night. So thank you.
I'm sorry, Director Westmoreland, what's happening? What date is that? On the 6th, you said?
Yeah, so there is a project, it's actually a Habitat for Humanity project that's been proposed on the Mills Church site. And there has been just a lot of obstacles within the Minnetonka city government structure to getting this project approved and moving forward. So they're asking supporters of affordable housing to join them at the meeting. I'm planning to speak in my capacity as a school board member about the importance of affordable housing in our community for our students, families, caregivers, and also for our staff.
Yeah, I was at the zoning meeting about that, and this location is in our district bounds, so it would alleviate some of the 159 families, students that are experiencing housing instability in our district. It would have impacted more, but as it is now, it would impact, 10 families. So I think that all we can do in our communities to support initiatives like that would be helpful. So yeah, May 6th. Or write a letter to the city of Minnetonka, your city council members, if you live in Minnetonka. Well, that concludes our board meeting. We don't have any other business before us this evening, so I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The meeting of the Hopkins School Board is adjourned at 9:15 p.m. Thank you all for showing up and being here with us this evening.